All right, let's go ahead and get started. Today is Wednesday, February 13th, and this is the Parks and Recreation Commission monthly meeting. So we can go ahead and get started if you'd like to take roll. Oh, and the time is 5:38.
Jessica West,
Here.
Dom Gelsomino,
Present.
Keith Bevan will be joining us a little bit later. Joe Greer is absent. Michelle Jensen is absent. Jackson Jones is absent. John Nesmith.
Present.
Mike Pepin.
Here.
Craig Steele.
Present.
All right, and can I get an adoption of the agenda?
Madam President,
Yes.
I move for the adoption of the minutes for the meeting of January 9th, 2019.
Craig still seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All opposed? Motion granted.
I feel, there we go.
Madam President,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve tonight's agenda for our meeting.
Anyone second?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion granted. All right, next we have our Shelley Houston to present us with the upcoming events.
I don't know if our sound system's on. Hello, commissioners. How are you? Again, this month it was a little bit of a stretch to pull together a calendar of events. We're just a little bit in our sleepy period in terms of events and activities, but rest assured we have so much in the works and planned and booked out for the warm weather months. It's very exciting, including some first-time events that you'll be hearing about soon. For now, I'd like to thank those of you who were able to join us for the State of the City address. We were in a brand new venue this year for the first time at the Galaxy Event Center. So I'd love to hear any feedback you had, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're kind of making some notes on what we might want to improve for the future if we use that venue. It was a learning experience this year. So thank you for attending. Interesting announcements and information, and I think the parks were nicely highlighted in words and video, so that was a nice thing. So let me know if you have any thoughts on the state of the city. There's a little talk, I don't think it's a secret, but next year, rather than hold it in February, they might hold it in April, as we'll have a new mayor, and that'll at least give them 100 years, or not 100 years, 100 days under their belt and have some things to report rather than taking office and having to instantaneously present a state of the city. So, exciting times ahead. Anyhow, on the calendar events I left you, this month there are free car seat inspections that our fire department does. It looks like almost like that's a monthly thing. There's a March date as well. Those are by appointment only. The Meridian Firefighters Chili Cook-Off is always a fun event over at the Dairy Barns next to the Speedway. All the different competing teams have different themes and costumes and little kitschy gimmicks to try to get you to vote them as their best to show. So good chili tasting and lots of fun at the Chili Cook-Off. One that you might want to attend also is Coffee with the Mayor. Our next Coffee with the Mayor is set for Tuesday, March 5th from 8 to 9:30 in the morning over at the True by Hilton. It's a hotel over kind of near Overland and Eagle Road. You might need to Google it. I have the address on there for you. There's also a casino night at the Senior Center, which is a collaboration between our fire department and the local Optimus Club. That's also, you pay $15 and get a lot of funny money to play with, and they have some raffles and silent auctions. And if you bring 2 or more non-perishable food items for the food bank, you get like $100 extra funny money to play with. So that's another good one. I think our next commission meeting will be on the normal schedule, March 13th, but I think we'll talk to you about the April meeting, which falls right during the annual Idaho Recreation and Park Association Conference, which is here in the Treasure Valley and which many of our staff members have been working to help plan and will be participating in. So I think Mike will probably talk to you about that. Another fun one is April 4th, Do the Right Day. That's the day that everyone in town is encouraged to do something kind for someone on the right. So you'll be hearing more about that as well. We've got Arbor Day, and then at the end of April, or mid-April, I should say, the Meridian Main Street Market will start up again. We've extended the season quite a ways. I think last year we didn't even start till, want to say June 24th or so. This time we're starting April 13th, and we'll run through October 12th. So we're really extending the market season, and the call is out for vendors, artisans or producers selling their own handmade or hand-grown products, merchandise, produce, fruit, baked goods, etc. So looking for a good mix there. That's all. If anything comes to mind, I'll have to let you know in the future. Do y'all have any questions at this time?
Madam President. Shelley, thank you so much, first of all, for everything you do. When I go upstairs and I see, and I go into the Parks and Recs department, you're always doing something, always on the ball. One of the things that I noticed with State of the City, not particularly the speech and event in and of itself, but when we tried displaying the last little bit to the MIACers this last Monday, we noticed that even with the volume on full blast, the sound of the YouTube recording of the mayor's speech
the recording
was,
of the live stream or the recording, okay.
yeah, the sound
audio
was just not there.
Okay, good to know, good to know. The Galaxy Event Center kind of handled our AV to a certain point. I'm not the techie doodle person, but we'll look into that. And I know Casey had some frustrations she mentioned, so we will definitely check into that. And KTVB, they arrived a little bit late and didn't get started, and then once it started, they were whispering, hey, we need, blah, blah. They couldn't get something working, and it was, by then the horse was out of the barn. So definitely there's some fine-tuning to be done there. So thank you for that input. I'll pass that on. Anything else at this time? Okay, I've got Valentine cookies to bake so I can win the Meridian Parks and Recreation cookie contest tomorrow. Let's get ready to crumble.
Thank you, Shelley. All right, on to new business. Do we have Justin Lucas available? Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Justin Lucas. I represent the Ada County Highway District. Our business address is 3775 Adams Street in Garden City, Idaho. And we provide transportation services to the city of Meridian, and we're glad to do it. I was asked to come and kind of give you guys a summary of our bike master plan and some of the advancements that we're making in bicycle planning in Meridian and across Ada County. So I'll go ahead and jump right in. Please feel free to just interrupt me if you have questions. I don't want this to be a lecture. This is hopefully more interactive, and I'm here to provide you with any answers to questions you might have or concerns you may have. So that stated, ACHD adopted its original bicycle master plan back in 2009. And in 2017 and then into 2018, we decided to do an update to that plan, considering all of the new information that we have associated with bicycle facilities, bicycle planning, and we thought it'd be a good opportunity to just kind of refresh the document and make sure that we were on the right track. So the overall purpose was to just kind of touch base on the goals, objective, and action items that were in the original plan, create new performance measures to help us evaluate success in our bicycle planning efforts and our projects, evaluate emerging trends and technology, and then identify, this was a huge part of the effort, was a regional low-stress bikeway network. And that's really important because that came from our commission and through the public outreach process. What we've heard is that the bicycle facilities which were popular throughout the 90s and early 2000s, which are primarily bike lanes adjacent to the travel lanes on a roadway, are not really meeting the needs of a broad spectrum of users. You're going to have certain individuals that feel comfortable riding in a bike lane adjacent to, like on U-Stick, 35-mile-per-hour road, four travel lanes, a center turn lane. But a lot of people just don't. And they don't because they don't feel comfortable riding in that type of environment. And those facilities were installed that way because back when those projects were planned and we were doing the planning, that was kind of the common bicycle facility treatment, not only here in Ada County, but across the United States. The common thought back then was and this came from a lot of the bicycle community, was they wanted to be treated as vehicles, those cyclists that ride. There's a large contingent of cyclists that really like those types of facilities, but those cyclists are typically what we call strong and confident. The commuter cyclist, the cyclist that feels really comfortable riding with traffic. But the feedback we've received is those are good and everyone's glad that we do them, but not a lot of people are using them for various reasons. And so our commission prompted us to look at what we're calling a low-stress network, or a network of bicycle facilities based on roadways or pathways that are less traffic, less cars, slower speeds, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a big part of the effort. So the key deliverables, and I'm going to go over some of these tonight. As I stated, we reviewed the goals and objectives. We did create an annual report template, so we'd be able to kind of report back to the communities on how things are going. I'll go into a little bit more detail on our facility selection matrix, which is a new thing that we created to help us decide what is the right facility based on the context of the roadway. We updated our bicycle facility maps, and obviously we created a new tool to program projects. So I'm not going to go into these in detail, but these were the main objectives from the plan, and they continue today, and there wasn't that much shifting on the overall objectives. The focus is a network that's connected and a network that is safe. I mean, that's the whole idea behind our bicycle network in Ada County, and certainly within the city of Meridian. This is what the annual report template looks like, and you can see the different categories that we're tracking, the funding that we're spending. This is not filled out yet. We're working on it right now. But the funding, network build-out, which kind of represents, based on the different facility types, how much do we actually have, access, percentage of population within a reasonable distance of a low-stress route, safety, which are projects specific for safety, maintenance, outreach efforts, and then we do have a neighborhood planning process that we go through across Ada County. We've actually done one plan for downtown Meridian, and we plan on doing a review of all the school zones within Meridian in the coming years, and so that's another big part of this overall effort. So this is our matrix, and as you can see on the different axes here on this chart, traffic is represented going up and down the y-axis, or the left side, and then down on the bottom you have speed going across the bottom. So the idea here is the more traffic and the higher speed, the more protection that a cyclist is going to need to feel comfortable. And so, for example, I don't know if you can see the cursor on your screens, but if you get up into that 35, 40 miles per hour, I'm sorry, I should start down here, 35, 40 miles per hour, and then with that, 10, 15, 20,000 vehicle trips per day, which is like a busy street like Ustick or Fairview, you're really looking at what we would consider a level 3, or the highest level of protection. These are buffered bike lanes, which is a standard bike lane with just more space between the travel lane and the actual bike lane. Protected bike lanes, where you have an actual physical barrier between the bike facility and the vehicular travel lanes. Raised bike lanes, we're going to actually build these on Cloverdale. The emergency project, those of you that drive on the I-84, you'll notice they're building a bridge there over the freeway. We're rebuilding that with ITD. And we're going to have a pathway across the actual overpass connecting into raised bike lanes on Cloverdale Road, which is going to be a new treatment for us here in Ada County. Cycle tracks, that's where you accommodate two-way bicycle traffic on one side of the street. And then multi-use pathways, which is a very common treatment you'll find across our county. And this is one of those we're starting to think a lot more seriously about removing the bike facility from the street. So taking it outside from within the curb and putting it over basically just a bigger, wider sidewalk where you could have more activity. That's something we're going to be doing on several projects going forward. And so then those the kind of lower volume streets, depending on how you measure it, and the lower speeds. This is, I think, a good example of a street like this would be in Meridian. We would consider this like McMillan Road. It doesn't have full bike facilities right now, but McMillan Road is only ever planned to be a 3-lane road, so it's one travel lane in each direction with a center turn lane. And that's a street where you'd be able to accommodate maybe conventional bike lanes, buffered bike lanes, or some other type of bike lane. But because of the lower volume, the lower speed, it's a little more comfortable. And then the focal point where we've spent a lot of our attention was down here on these low-stress bikeways. So these are those areas where you feel pretty darn comfortable just riding in the street or on a pathway, something like that. I think a good example of a low-stress bikeway that's being kind of developed, working with Parks and Recreation and ACHD, is 8th Street, that corridor in Meridian. So if you're on basically from Pine up through by the middle school, then you can go north on 8th Street and connect over where the city of Meridian built a bridge over the canal there connecting into the Bud Porter pathway. That's the kind of thing that we're wanting to enhance and do more of, is make those connections on streets like 8th, which are lower volume, lower speed, adjacent to schools, and that's what we would consider a low-stress bikeway. So this was a new approach. We're really excited about this new approach because we believe it'll respond more to what the citizens are asking for when it comes to bike facilities, certainly what the cities are asking for, and we're excited to implement this. I'll pause there if you have any questions specifically on the matrix.
President,
Commissioner Steele?
with the low stress, like 8th Street or whatever, are you guys going in and adding bicycle lanes or just leaving it the way it is, increasing sidewalk size, that kind of stuff?
So it really, Commissioner, it really depends on the context of the street. 8th Street's a good example where we'll probably leave the existing sidewalks in place. There's parking allowed on that street. But what we've been adding on streets like that, more signage, the Shero markings, which are those markings that go directly in the roadway. It's like a chevron with a bicyclist there. It's not a full lane, but it kind of shows where a cyclist could ride. And we're branding these bikeways and trying to do some community outreach to let people know. So that's an example, like probably what we would do on 8th Street. We just completed a bikeway on Leadville and Boise where we actually did intersection improvements and added bulb outs and some pedestrian improvements associated with the overall corridor. So it really just depends on the street and what's right for that specific corridor, because every one of these is really unique in the amount of traffic, the different destinations and generators and attractors that are on the corridor.
Are you going out and working with the different cities to like identify pathways and stuff like that, and work with the hawk signals, things like that?
Absolutely. The connections into the pathway network that the city is developing is critical, because really there is no lower stress spot for a cyclist than on a pathway that is completely separated from the street, no cars whatsoever, Bud Porter Path and all of the other pathways in Meridian. And it's how can ACHD better connect into that network and provide connections where maybe the pathway is going along, it intersects with the street, you need to cross. I think a good example of this, which Meridian Parks and Rec has done such a great job on, is where Bud Porter Pathway crosses Linder Road. So you can cross Linder now, and Meridian actually went in and widened the pathway along that section, connecting up so you can get into the Bridge Tower network and all that stuff. So those are the exact kind of connections we're looking to make with the low stress network.
Wonderful. Commissioner Gelsomino?
Madam President, thank you. Lucas, if any, what impact does the rate of growth of our city have on this matrix in the short and long run?
Really good question. I think the short answer is with growth comes traffic. So volume on the streets. So streets that now probably are comfortable potentially for a cyclist, over time, as those streets need to be widened or they become more congested, they could become more uncomfortable in the future. So when we're planning for our facilities, at least through a major capital project, we're actually looking at the future and designing the ultimate solution for the future rather than current conditions. And that's a key thing we have to always be thinking about. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, and kind of elaborating further, when projecting the rate of growth and like you mentioned, the expansion and any updates that need to happen to these streets, will there be a bigger fiscal impact as far as having to update? Let's say, you go from a phase 2, or, from a section 2 to section 3, is there a huge fiscal impact to update that based on the rate of growth and having to update that street where that buffer or that bike lane needs to be put?
Really good question. Certainly, the biggest impact from some of these facilities is the space required to install them. And anytime you're adding width or separation, you're adding distance, which is right-of-way for ACHD. It's land we have to purchase to then provide those facilities within the right-of-way. And that's something we've talked with our commission a lot about, is the impact of how, if we're going to go down this road and do these more enhanced facilities, we need to be careful that we probably can't do them everywhere. Certain corridors, for example, like the 10-mile corridor in Meridian, it has 5-foot bike lanes. That's what it's going to get. We're not going to change on that corridor because we've already installed them almost all the way up. So these final 2 projects from Ustick to McMillan and McMillan up to Chinden on 10 Mile, we're not changing the game. We're going to stick with what we already had on that corridor. And that's going to be a really busy corridor where people, if they are riding there, they're going to have to be pretty confident. That being said, over on Linder, we're looking at maybe doing something different. Linder's a different corridor. We're doing a concept design right now on the connection from Chinden over to State Street, which goes over the river. And the concept that we're exploring has a multi-use pathway on both sides. So that connection to the river and beyond would be much more comfortable than other river crossings in our valley. So yes, there's a huge fiscal impact, and we have to be strategic in how we approach that. I'll show you some maps of kind of the things we're thinking about so that we're able to kind of match what we're doing here to actual on-the-ground projects. So this is an example. This is the overall low-stress network that we've been working on. And you can see the greens are actual green belt and other paths. So we took, and this is all, a lot of the existing streets. The pathway network and system that Meridian is working on is represented here. And you can see how using kind of those connections basically at the mid-mile, not at the mile. The mile is the arterial network. The mid-mile is the network we're trying to create, linking into the pathway network and bringing that network down. Up here in North Meridian, it's going to be a little easier because the network is more robust. In South Meridian, it's a little more disjointed because the growth is still occurring out there. But we have some good ideas of how to connect that going forward in the future. To kind of zoom in, this is North Meridian, and you can see the colors represent the different levels. The yellows, the purples, and the blues represent the more protected, the more need for protection. For example, you can see the future. A road like Black Cat would give us some interesting possibilities in the future of how we deal with that road because it hasn't really been widened yet. And so when we do widen it, we'd be able to maybe do something different than what is on 10 Mile or Ustick today. And so you can see a lot of the roads in Meridian are that level 2, level 1. Some of them rise up to that level 3. Fairview is a really interesting one where it's just such a challenging corridor. There's a lot of driveways, a lot of traffic, a lot of conflicts. It's just really difficult to get a bicycle facility that fits well in that kind of context. And so you can see that that's why we kind of put some of those dashed lines in there, because there's areas where we know we need more thought and more planning. So I'll shift over. This is South Meridian area. You can see a lot of these pathways match your pathway network that this commission, I know, thinks about and is working on. And as you modify that, we can then modify our maps to make sure we're matching in. But there's a lot of good work happening out there when it comes to the pathway network, and we want to maximize that as much as we can, because those pathways are critical parts of the low-stress network. So with that, I'm certainly glad to take any other questions you may have or comments. And
Madam President.
Commissioner Steele?
On the north, can you go back one?
certainly.
How are you guys taking into account the new pathways? You know, I'm going to give you an example, and we've kind of worked on it with Bridge Tower, as far as the one that just comes in front, that one, in front of the school. And you guys are going to be changing Linder and stuff. There's a hawk signal right there. Are you guys making adjustments to get them back to U-stick, or is that another place where you're going to widen the sidewalks and try and work with that to get that into that piece right there?
Yeah, this is an interesting corridor. It's actually under construction. We're going to be building and widening this right now. This was designed several years ago, and so it's actually going to have the 5-foot bike lanes on it, the Linder corridor, which with the traffic we're looking at there, bike lanes is not an inappropriate treatment for that specific corridor. We are adding I think we're adding 2 hawk signals on that corridor when we widen it. So those crossings are included in the project.
But now you've got a pathway on that east side that they have created for the school kids to get back and forth to that U-stick intersection.
The pathway on the east side, I'm just trying to think of which. You're talking about
Right in there, yes.
The pathway that we put a temporary pathway in leading to Sawtooth Middle School.
So if there's that much foot traffic, how are you going to solve it with just a bike lane?
So we'll have a bike lane, and you'll also have a 7-foot sidewalk.
So that's going to be a larger sidewalk.
It'll be
on that side.
I believe that it'll be a little bit of a larger sidewalk on that side of the street. Yes, on Linder Road, connecting into the middle school.
Okay. And then just another quick question. Down by the Bud Porter, where it comes in, from the park there, that's a real squeeze point because of the canal.
Yeah.
Are you going to pipe the canal there, or how are you
So
going to
that
do
section of Linder, we haven't decided yet.
Oh, okay.
Because the canal, there's a couple spots there that are really difficult to work with. Because the canal sits so far below the roadway, there's going to be some significant planning and engineering work that we're going to have to do to figure out what to do there. If and when we're ever getting to widen that section of road. We're not all that excited about it. We're going to have to take a whole row of houses on one side of that section of Linder to make all that work. So that's not in our current plan. But when we get there and we design it, yes, the accommodations for the pathway would be part of that because it's identified on the map.
Okay.
Mr. Lucas, I have a question for you. The plan that has Locust Grove to go on both sides of Shinden, timeline-wise, where's that project at in your plan?
So-
is that this year, or how do you?
Chinden, and you're talking about the intersection of Chinden and Locust Grove?
Yes, so to take it to potentially connecting to the Greenbelt, you talked about looking at both sides for multi-way. I just didn't know if there were any kind of projected timeline.
So
when
we're
that might
working with
take place.
ITD on the intersection of Chinden and Locust Grove. So that'll be done as part of the widening of Chinden Boulevard.
Mm-hmm.
The remaining segments, I think we're going to connect down to the sidewalk that exists there. But the bike facilities on that specific corridor won't be installed yet until we actually go and widen that section of Locust Grove.
And then on the other side?
So to the north, it's primarily done. I'm trying to think if there's a bike lane there now or not. I can't picture it in my mind. But it's a relatively low volume street, Locust Grove, to the north of Chinden. And so the facilities that are there, maybe signage, maybe some type of striping would be needed, but we don't have a construction project planned for that area.
And with the widening of Chinden Boulevard, since you are working on that intersection, how does that play as far as going down all of Chinden? Like when they widen that, is there already defined exactly what will be for bikes?
So Chinden is under the jurisdiction of ITD, so it's a different agency. But I know that the City of Meridian has worked very closely with ITD to ensure that there's a multi-use pathway planned for that entire corridor.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? Well, thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Lucas. This is wonderful to see all of the actual plans and where you're working at to make sure we're all collaborating together.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, up next, we have a Compass Idaho update from Lisa Itkinen. Hello, welcome.
Thank you. Madam President, members of the Commission, my name is Lisa Itkinen. I'm a principal planner with Compass and also the planning team lead. And I appreciate the invite to come and talk to you about what Compass is and what we do. Okay. There we go. So first of all, let's go back one. So I will tell you a little bit briefly about what Compass is and what it does, and then I will talk to you about the long-range transportation plan, which is especially from my perspective, the key planning document and product that Compass does. And then I talk a little bit more about bicycle and pedestrian planning in particular and some of the projects and programs that we're involved in. So Compass is a forum for regional collaboration, really for Ada and Canyon counties, and helping agencies to work together and make sure that we have a vibrant and economically healthy region that offers choices for people, not just for how they travel, but where they live and play and work and do all kinds of fun stuff. Compass is a member organization, as the full name says, Community Planning Association of Southwest Idaho. We are an association of the local governments. So we have member agencies in Ada and Canyon counties, so the two counties are members, all the cities in the two counties, most of the highway districts. Ada County Highway District is one of the members, and we work very closely with them. As well as 2 of the 4 highway districts in Canyon County. And then we have some other special members in addition to that, such as Boise State University, Idaho Department of Environmental Quality, and Idaho Transportation Department. So we also function as the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the 2 counties, and that's a federally required entity for an area once it grows to be about 50,000 people. So we've had this type of organization in the Treasure Valley since the mid-70s under various names. And Compass, as this kind of planning organization, has these 4 main roles. So we plan, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. We also help implement projects. So we work with member agencies to fund their projects and make sure that federal funds are allocated for them to projects that have been identified. We do a 5-year budget, which is called the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. I'll mention that a little bit later too, so keep TIP in mind. And we provide technical expertise in terms of, we collect a lot of data, we analyze data, we do mapping, all kinds of GIS work for member agencies and for others. A lot of consultants come and, they need maps for projects that they're working on, and we provide that kind of service also. And we will be doing an orthophotography flight here very soon, I guess when the weather clears and before the trees start to have leaves. And we also facilitate, not just facilitating the member agencies and agencies in the Treasure Valley working together, but also providing that kind of forum for the public to provide feedback to regional decisions and projects that are being worked on. Oh, there. So the long-range transportation plan, like I said, this is a key piece of what Compass does. It's a federal required thing also to have a regional long-range transportation plan that looks out at least 20 years into the future. We update it every 4 years, and that is also a federal requirement because of some of the air quality issues that the region has. And really the purpose of that is to plan the transportation system that we need to accommodate the growth that we're forecasting, 20 years out. The current plan is brand new. The Compass Board adopted that in December, and it's called Communities in Motion 2040 2.0. You have the summary brochure in front of you, and that is the only printed item that we have of this plan. It's all online. And you can get to that from the Compass website, compassidaho.org. You have a link on there as well. And so it has the plan is online. There is a lot of technical information and technical documents kind of behind the scenes that you can access through the website. And so I really encourage you to go and take a look at that. And this plan, the horizon year is 2040. And it's an update to the plan that was adopted in 2014. And we have the same growth forecast for year 2040, just over 1 million people in the 2 counties. And that's quite a bit, considering that we're now at about 668,000. And back in 2012, we as the region developed a vision for what that growth should look like. And the map on the screen is that vision map, illustrating kind of what that growth might look like, what types of development might go where. And that's really, it goes inside with the comprehensive plans that cities and counties had at the time. And we are we are reconciling this vision every year based on the development that is actually happening on the ground. So the total forecast doesn't change, but where that growth is happening is kept accurate. And every year we get this information from the member cities and counties, and so we can be kind of true to what's actually going on. And in this plan update, we focused specifically on looking at the transportation system in these 4 components. So we have the usual roadways, public transportation, freight, and active transportation or bicycle and pedestrian networks. And in that bicycle and pedestrian planning, we looked at starting with kind of the supply. So what kind of infrastructure and facilities are currently in place? And then in addition to that, we wanted to know where is there demand? Where should we have these kinds of facilities based on what people would be using? And I'll talk about the counter program in a little bit. And from this, then we were able to identify gaps, again, looking at kind of on the regional scale, looking at where we would need future pathways and how to prioritize those. So this is it's a mapping tool that we have available online. So you can access this also from the Compass website, Bike Walk Compass, and this is based on the agencies, so the cities and counties, including ACHDs, existing facilities, so sidewalks and bikeways, as well as what's being planned. And we are updating this every so often to make sure that, you know, for instance, Justin talked about the new low-stress network that they're developing. So as they get that one finalized, then we will incorporate that into this. So this is really intended to be for anybody to go in and take a look at what kind of facilities are where and what's being planned. I wouldn't recommend necessarily that you go and try to plan a bike trip based on this map, because there may be some gaps there that you will encounter. So use this more as a planning tool. And those counters. So back in 2015, we started this counter program, and initially, so we currently have 12 permanent counters. So these are counters that are installed at these blue locations, and they are counting bicycles and pedestrians 24/7, 365. And we get that data, and it's available online. And then those red dots represent the portable counts that we've done. So we have a number of different types of portable counters that we can go and install as agencies request. Let's say that you're you're thinking of doing a pathway connection somewhere, but you want to know, are people using this now, and how much? So you could do it before and after kinds of things. And we've done these counts in almost 170 locations in the 2 counties since 2015. Like I said, the permanent counts are available online, and you can get there from this bike and ped icon, this one here. This is just a screenshot on the Compass website homepage. You have these icons, so clicking on that, you can get to the information about anything bike and ped related. And there is this these reports of the permanent counts. Meridians they're a little bit lower, because there's one on Tully Park that was installed late 2016, early 2017. So there are counts there for those 2 years, 17 and 18. And this here kind of gives you, okay, there you go, gives you an idea what this counter is like. So there's a post that kind of looks like those, people can put out cigarettes in there, and some actually do. We had a problem at the Friendship Bridge in Boise. We had to put a sign on this thing saying this is not a, don't put your cigarettes out here. Yeah. But there's an infrared signal here that counts the pedestrians, and then on the pavement here there is a loop that's buried on that counts the bicycles. So this can actually differentiate bikes and pedestrians.
I'm sorry, what did you say was called? You said there's an under...
It's an inductive loop.
Oh, okay.
And it's under that pavement. You see that little diamond cut here.
Yes.
So those are installed in there. And so here's an example of the type of data that we get out of these permanent counters. And this is at Tully Park for pedestrians for 2018. So starting from January 1st through December 31st. Weekly traffic profile, hourly profile for weekdays and weekends. Do you see anything here that catches your attention?
Can you explain what the numbers mean as far as the numbers down at the bottom versus the percentage?
Okay. These are hours of the day. And the percent is essentially of all the total traffic, right. So over 18% of everybody going into Tully Park went there around 3 in the afternoon.
Children from school.
Children after school, I believe is what.
Right. The interesting thing that kind of jumped at me about looking at this was that people go in, so the yellow one is the westbound, and from where the counter is, if you go west, you're going into the park, but people don't come out. So what we figured is it's probably because then there are other, maybe kids are going into the park, but then they go somewhere else from the park to other places.
Or whatever after school.
Yeah. That was just kind of an interesting thing to note. And this is the same information, but for bicyclists. So it looks like bicyclists are coming out the same way. But again, this information is available online, and you can go in there and pull this and look at it. And if you have any questions, reach out to Compass and we'll help you.
Well, so being one of the, I believe we're one of the fastest growing cities in America, I'm surprised that Meridian doesn't have more counters. If you're trying to estimate, Meridian only had a few counters. Our surrounding cities had more counters than us. Why would that be?
That's a, Madam President, that's a resource issue. We have a list of counters that we would like to have, or locations where to put them, and it's really, as you know, we are going after grants. We are putting these requests to our budget every year, and hoping that we can get more. One thing that you can do is request these portable counts. So, for any any location, for length of time, and really it's an online form, and I have the screenshot of that one there, and you could go in, and essentially all it needs is who's requesting, what the contact information is, where you would want it, and kind of roughly what purpose, so that we can then help you identify what kind of counter would make the most sense. What, when you want it, any particular time, or is it just if there's a project going in, we want something before or after. But that's definitely something. If you think of locations where you would want to have a permanent counter, please let me know, and we can get those on the list for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
And the other, then kind of from there, the regional bicycle and pedestrian planning that we do, this is a map of regional bikeways and pathways that have been proposed. And in the next year or so, we will be developing a plan to actually make these yellow lines here into projects that can be funded. The green, so all in all, there's almost 400 miles of pathways on that map. The green ones are about 90 miles that already exist. And then the rest is things that, we're working with an advisory work group, an active transportation work group, and they identified these locations as, to make a truly regional pathway system. Those are the locations that we would need. In addition to what you see here, there's a lot of kind of more local pathways, like you just saw on Justin's maps, and what the city has been developing as well. But this is truly looking at the regional level, what kinds of things would we need. Getting into the specific programs and projects, we've been working on Trails with Trails since 2016, and really following from the work that City of Meridian did initially. That was kind of the impetus for Compass to get involved and start looking at this on a regional level. And we are looking at this for that whole 35-mile rail corridor. And again, we have a separate working group there, Rails with Trails working group, and they identified 3 different kinds of cross-sections that would work for this trail. And we've developed since a planning estimate for getting about 25 feet of the right-of-way to put this kind of trail and some amenities on that. And we have a consultant that we've been working with now to get them under contract to do more design and costing work for us, so that we would have a better plan and better cost estimates ready to go when Union Pacific changes their mind and says, okay, we can talk about getting the right of way. So the purpose of this really is to be ready when the opportunities present themselves, because things will change and there might be something that comes up. Part of that Railswood Trails pathway is this 9 Mile Creek that's in Meridian, and this is a piece that the city has been working on, and it is included in that long-range plan, Community Motion 2040 as a long-term funded project in preliminary development. So it's in there. And then the city requested that we remove this project from the Transportation Improvement Program, or the TIP, because the cost has kind of outgrown the funding source. And we are, the city is anticipating that it will be funded at some point, probably from some other sources, possibly private development or some other kind of catalyst that comes along. But since we are removing this from the TIP, we are doing a TIP amendment to do that, and that is going out for public comment starting tomorrow morning. So it will be out for public comment for 2 weeks, from the 14th through the 28th. And you can, so this is a screenshot of the Compass website homepage. There's the bicycle and pedestrian icon that you can get more information and find it fast. So if you go there on this tomorrow morning, you will see that public comment opportunity on that tip. And there is that, removing that one pathway project there is going to be on that. You can also find that long-range plan from this. That would be an easy way. There's also hot topics, and those, the public comment opportunity will be there, as well as the long-range plan. And so, in closing, for things, you know, for you to keep in mind, so we're doing, Compass is doing planning for Ada and Canyon counties to plan the transportation system that meets future needs within the constraints of the funding that we have. And active transportation is one of the components in that, very specifically as its own thing, and looking at that in particular. And that it's an online plan currently, and you have that summary document in your, as a handout.
So
with that.
Oh, sorry. So for the 2040 plan and identifying public transportation, were there new public transportation recommendations to meet the $1 million, or not $1 million, but the 1 million?
Yes.
Population?
So what ended up happening in this, so when we do the plan, we also do a financial forecast, looking at how much money we can reasonably expect to have by 2040. So looking at all the revenues coming in, the expenditures that various agencies have identified. And then we can show as funded the projects that will actually, we can expect to have money for. There's a lot of needs beyond that, such as public transportation. So those are then, in this plan, we've identified those as unfunded needs, and they were prioritized also, so that when additional money comes available, we know where to put it. So there are 5 public transportation priorities that are all unfunded. So according to this plan, there is no additional capacity unless there is additional money.
Okay, that's what I was kind of wondering. What was the #1 priority if money did come? Do you recall?
For public transport, so what we ended up doing is actually prioritizing the needs in 3 different categories. So we have state system projects, such as, well, I-84 is #1 there, finishing it up in Canyon County. Chinden, US 2026 is #2, and then State Street or Highway 44 is #3. Then we have local system projects, and there's Franklin Road between Black Cat and 10 Mile is number one. And then on public transportation, State Street, high capacity corridor, and getting high capacity transit there is number one.
President.
Oh, Commissioner Steele?
Quick question. I didn't kind of understand where that section between Black Cat and 10 Mile, if you want to go back one more screen or two more. What do you mean you guys took it off? Were you looking for a funding source or?
No, we actually got a letter from City of Meridian requesting that we remove this project at this time.
Okay, I mean, what kind of a project was it for Compass?
This is, so in the Transportation Improvement Program, we include all projects that have federal funding or that are regionally significant. So, and this one had federal funding from the Transportation Alternatives Program, a little over $100,000 for design. And because it had federal funding, it was included in here. And that was the piece that, so the project had grown, kind of outgrown that source. And so the city requested that we remove it at this time, and then the city will look at funding it from other sources later.
I think Mr.
Mike, why would we keep it on and both work on it?
Sure. Madam President, Commissioner Steele, yeah. So we were funded to do the design work. And the scope of work that, or the price to do the design work, you need to design it to federal standards. So there's only a certain number of consultants to do that. So the price of the design work alone was going to exceed the $100,000 because it had to, there was environmental work, there's state historical preservation requirements. And then, but we could do that, but if you do the design work and then you don't use federal funds to build the project, you need to pay the design work back. So the project itself for construction had grown from roughly an original planning level estimate of $300,000 to well over $700,000. Because of the bridge, because of the length of the pathway, because of some of the environmental concerns where at the confluence of 9 Mile and 5 Mile creeks. So not only did the project grow beyond what their program year could fund in any given year, it was pushed out to program development. So it was really an unfunded project that was passed. They can only look out for, I think it's 5 years.
Right.
And then, so this one ended up past 5 years. So, and even at that, with the construction, so if they couldn't fund the whole thing, then we would be liable to supplement the construction budget with city funds, with funds from the general fund. The problem is that when you build to federal standards, then all the Davis-Bacon wages and all of those requirements kick in. So those projects carry a price tag that's about 40% higher than if we just built it ourselves. So we made a decision that at the end of the day, if everything worked out perfectly with the federal funds, it was going to potentially cost us the same as if we did it ourselves. So we said, look, we can do it ourselves for the same price. We might as well do it ourselves because it's less cumbersome, and we can do it sooner, or we can have the ability to make a decision. And some of these properties right now that are east or west of the wastewater treatment plant are in negotiation right now for residential development. They're waiting for the comprehensive plan amendment to come through to lower the buffer around the wastewater treatment plant. And I think that's going to happen. When that happens, then that residential developments, they can start happening around this pathway, and they're going to build it for us. So we can do it, we can be lighter, cheaper, quicker by not being involved with the federal funding component through Compass. And Compass has been awesome. We don't have a tremendous experience with this. This is not, you know, we don't do this on a daily basis, and Tony Tisdale and the staff at Compass has been fantastic in guiding us and helping us, and because we have these questions like, hey, you know, this scenario, what if it plays out this way? Okay, you're going to be responsible to pay this much. And so at the end of the day, we weighed the pros and cons and all the options, and we opted to back out of that funding.
So now with the building of that, or the permits that might be out there, will it get us all the way to Black Cat?
Yeah. So with the wastewater treatment plant expansion, they're planning another road, potentially another road in from Black Cat, so we would utilize that. We would have a detached sidewalk of sorts right there. So some of that would probably get built for us. The only thing that we would be responsible for is the bridge that crosses 5 Mile Creek. So at that point, now you're down to, you know, in just rough numbers, $200,000 to $300,000 to get a bridge across that, instead of who knows what. If we used federal funds, the bridge would be $400,000 to $500,000. Those were just decisions we made, and we said, look, we can really focus on that connection. We can do it for less money, if not the same price. We can do it a lot quicker.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you for that detail. Any other questions from the commission? Oh, Commissioner Gelsomino.
Madam President, Ms. Sikonen, has a similar plan like this ever been, I guess, test-driven, if you want to say that way, in any other city that could demographically be similar to Meridian, or any county in, you know, the Northwest or in the United States that is similar to Ada County? Or is this a plan that is unique in and of itself for Ada County?
When you say test-driven,
so has a similar, let's say, has a similar plan like this ever been introduced or experimented with in a county, for example, that could potentially encompass Salt Lake City, Utah, as an example?
yes.
Okay.
That's yes, and like I said, so any area that once they grow to be above 50,000 people, they will produce a plan like this.
Okay.
And you know, Salt Lake, we've looked at Salt Lake a lot because where we are now, Salt Lake was about 20 years ago.
Wow.
And it's really interesting to look at the map also, because if you turn Salt Lake sideways, it looks like the Treasure Valley. They kind of have the same constraints. We don't have the lake, but we have mountains down south. So it's been a really interesting kind of a test case in a way, to look at what did Salt Lake do 20 years ago to get to where they are now. And there are other areas around the country that we look at, kind of peer areas, peer communities, peer regions, to figure out what our kind of similar size communities are doing with sort of similar resources, but then also looking at some bigger areas that have more resources to look at kind of where should we be heading. The big difference with us and Idaho in general is the funding situation. You know, the question about public transportation and what kinds of improvements we might have is we do not have a locally dedicated funding source for public transportation, and that is a problem. So we cannot fund operating a transit system essentially from any kind of dedicated source. So currently, Valley Regional Transit gets funding from their member agencies, essentially paying for the service that they are providing.
Madam President, to follow up, Ms. Ikonen, has funding for such a project ever been introduced in, for example, the Transportation Committee in the legislature? Has it been what kind of pushback are you getting from the state level, if it has received pushback, that you've noticed, and why?
Currently, Idaho is one of 2 states that does not allow local option taxing authority. Mississippi is the other one. And there's been proposals and efforts to get that kind of legislation through. The last one was several years ago, and I believe there is another. I mean, that's one of Compass's legislative priorities is to get local option taxing authority. And so we have a lobbyist that is working with the legislature on that, and not just for Compass, but this is really a kind of statewide effort. Other MPO, other urban areas as well as counties and cities are behind this. So there is plenty of interest from kind of the local side to get this kind of option. For whatever reason, the legislature has not been interested in doing that.
Thank you very much for this presentation and for coming and explaining all of the plans and Compass to us. It's been wonderful. It does come up quite a bit when we're doing some of our pathways design and trying to keep up with where different Compass projects are. So it's wonderful to get this map and all this information for us.
And our office is, just about a block east from here on Broadway. So
nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we have our Tyler Roberts with Adult Sports Program update.
All right, well, thank you for having me. Go through a quick presentation about the Adult Sports Program year in review. We'll start with some logos that we upgraded this year. Our last year Summer Fun Kickoff Tournament, that's what it looked like. We're changing it to this one this year. Got the water tower in the back, got the little banner there at home plate. I'm really happy with the way that turned out. Last year, if you won a championship in our Adult Sports Program, you wore a shirt with this design on it right here. For 2019, this will be the shirt that you see. So if you see individuals out there wearing shirts with this, you know that they went through our program. And I have seen them at Winco from time to time, and definitely other sporting events, and sometimes at Boise Parks and Rec events as well. So it's fun to see that. We'll jump right into statistics with our teams. There's a 6-year review. I know it looks a little untrending for us to not be growing. We had the same amount of teams last year as the year before. There's a lot of factors that play into that. For example, primarily, I got rid of about a 20-team volleyball league that happened in the summertime. It just wasn't sustainable for us to run. So I reduced that program. Also, we turned teams away just due to facility space. So that's why we're seeing this little bit of a plateau effect from 2017 to 2018. We got a little creative with home court this year, and we were able to open up a few more spots. So year to date, we're actually, for 2019, we're already up about 7, 8, 9 teams. So hopefully we can keep pacing that forward, especially with the new fields or softball fields coming on. For our participants, same thing, down a little bit, primarily the volleyball league, but at the same time, even leagues that had the same amount of teams in them or even more teams, they just had less players, and you can't always account for that, but 2019 is already trending in a much better direction, so not overly worried about that. Revenues, I had to increase some prices just because we had some unforeseen increases to my costs. So we were still able to go up a little bit, but with our numbers staying and plateauing, I'm okay with revenues plateauing. So I'm hopefully creating a fair cost to the participant while still staying under budget. Year to date, we are up $3,000 in revenues from last year to this year, but at the same time, expenses are pretty much the same, down $30. So I like seeing that. If we have weather issues or if we have facility issues or equipment issues, we have a little room to play with, which, I mean, I'm just waiting for something to happen. So some changes and additions from last year. I had a lot of requests to sell T-shirts at the Summer Fun Kickoff. I try to keep costs of this tournament super low, or extremely low. So I don't have as much staff as I'd like to have, or I only have a couple of us out there with a couple maintenance members. I'm trying to keep costs low, so selling T-shirts is a little bit of a challenge just because it's throwing on more work to a really busy weekend. But Ended up selling them $15 a shirt, family-friendly price. Everyone loved that. Normally they see them for 20, 25, 30 bucks at these events, so they really like to see it. We netted $400 off of it, sold 95 shirts. This number is going to increase in future years because I ran out of the small and mediums halfway through the tournament, so I just ordered the incorrect amount, knowing that that was probably going to happen, but I also didn't want to be sitting on a bunch of empty shirts and have that waste. So next year, order smaller sizes. We ran our first indoor ultimate disc tournament. Ultimate disc is it's ultimate frisbee, as well known, but they don't like using the term frisbee. It's growing in popularity. High schools have teams that play for them. Colleges, you see this all over the place. So having an opportunity for the community here, they love to play outdoors, but during the winter time, obviously not possible, and we have home court, so why not make two parties happy? We took one of the low Saturdays on home court that historically never has anything on it, and we put this tournament in there. It was only 4 teams and 28 players, but for 4 or 5 hours, we filled up that gym and everyone had a good time. And this was also a good opportunity for my assistant Ryan. He's looking for ways to become a sports coordinator. This was his project to run, something nice and easy, and he did a great job. So we'll keep running it. Have a great relationship with the Ultimate Disc community, so it'll go next year as well. The best change that we had, most impactful change, was I reformatted the scheduling structure for our volleyball leagues. Previously, it was on a preference-based scheduling system, so teams would let me know what day they want to play, and I try to match that up with all their opponents. 600 different matchups in a season. It was a pretty hectic schedule. So what I did was I took co-ed and said, you're only playing on Monday and Wednesday. I took women's teams and said, you're only playing Tuesday and Thursday. This helps me. This probably knocked off about 4 or 5 hours of scheduling time for a league, which is it was nice to have, and it just instantaneously reduces mistakes because you have teams that not only say, I want to play Tuesday, Wednesday, but I also have players on this team that wants to play Wednesday, Thursday, and now you just don't really have to worry about that because it's primarily women's and like a co-ed team. So now there's just no way to overlap that. So that really helped there. Teams like it because when they go out and recruit players, they have a better idea of, hey, we're going to play either Tuesday or Wednesday, or Tuesday or Thursday, or Monday or Wednesday, depending on your league. And so it's easier on managers to recruit. Reschedule requests, this has been the biggest one. Since our last year volleyball league, up to this point, we had about 26 reschedule requests, and up to this year, we're down to about 13. So we've seen it cut in half, which saves my time, which saves staff time, officials showing up to wrong gyms, facilities not sure where we're going, opponents and their babysitters and rides and everything like that. It's just a compounding effect. If we can have less of these, the program's in a better spot. So went really well with that change. My biggest challenge, I've been here a little over 2 years, and I'd like to think that all my sports except for one are pretty turnkey, and they're all kind of dialed in, but basketball has just been a beast from day one, and it continues to do so, but it's actually kind of on the right track, I think, with some of the changes that we've put in this year. Primarily, players, managers, fans, just showing a general lack of poor sportsmanship. It turns into a little bit of a show. They're mean towards the officials, they're mean towards staff, they're mean towards other players, and it was really hard to get kind of a grasp on it and get the picture to them that we need to change this up. So I implemented a sportsmanship rating for this year. My officials and my scorekeepers grade them on a 1 to 5 scale based on 1, you did terrible, 5, you did really well. And right now I'm just getting research on how well that goes. And seeing where teams add up, because eventually it's going to have an impact. So if you don't get above a 3.5, you don't make the playoffs or something like that. And just noticing just the presence of a sportsmanship rating alone has actually really helped. So on the right direction for basketball. Basketball officials, if you ask the finance department, we've had a lot of meetings based on this topic right here. It's just there's not enough quality officials in the Valley to meet the demand of basketball. It's actually kind of a national issue. And so a lot of programs have gone away with officiated basketball, and I decided, and Colin can attest, we were not far off from that decision about a month ago. But I decided to take a little bit of control. Instead of using one association that's based out of Nampa, I'm using Nampa, I'm using association out of Boise, and I hired 6 of my own officials, 4 of which have never officiated before, but in my previous position, that's what I did, is I trained basketball officials. And so I trained 4 of them. got them up to the level that we wanted to, and now I'm using kind of 3 different bodies to cover our games. Eventually, I'm hoping to get a crop of about 10 to 12 officials that cover all of our games for us, and that'll actually save some costs as well. Hired officials show up on time, have a little investment, versus some of the guys that we get out of the NAMPA Association. They're there for the money, and they're there when they want to be there, or if not at all. So that saves me from running out and officiating a game on a night I wasn't expecting to, saves staff from stepping in. Really is a better route. Moving forward with a couple goals, I'd love to get, I know it's in the docket, love to get another sports coordinator. With the workload right now, it's feasible, doable. Definitely a challenge, but obtainable. But if we ever want to take our program to the next level, get a lot more tournaments in here. We have the home court facility. We have 2 new softball fields coming online. I've already had 3 people contact me wanting to run softball fields or softball tournaments out there. I'd like to be the one, and our program to be the one to take that on. But I would need additional help if that's something we wanted to do. So hopefully we can have that happen. Transition softball leagues into the same scheduling format as volleyball. I can't do that until we get our new fields, but there's a lot of benefits. I just gave out a softball survey that actually they want to see this format as well. So this is something that we'll see hopefully not this summer, but probably the next summer. Hire more basketball officials, as I touched on, be the sole provider of the program. And then implement an indoor slow pitch wiffle ball softball league. I know it's kind of a mouthful, but same thing as the indoor ultimate disc. The softball players around here are very, very passionate, and they love to play. They play year-round. On January 3rd, I got a call from a buddy that asked about, will the softball fields be playable on January 5th? And it's just surprising. I said, well, you're going to have to avoid the disc golf catcher out in right field. Other than that, you'll probably have a field to play on. So instead of that, I think we could provide an indoor wiffle ball type environment that we've actually got a little bit of research on moving for next year. So I think we'll be good. With that, in closing, here are the yearly sponsors that I had just for a couple of my different programs, but opening the floor to any questions that you have.
Any questions from the commissioners?
Good job.
All right, thank you.
Looks wonderful.
Madam President?
Yes.
If you don't mind, I'd just like to, I don't have any questions for you, Tyler. I just wanted to highlight or, emphasize a couple of the things that Tyler said, and just kind of reiterate how well of a job Tyler's done for us over the last couple of years. He mentioned the basketball officiating. That has been a huge deal for us. It used to be that we would just schedule out for the officials like we do with an association. That turned south on us in a hurry last year, and to have somebody like Tyler who's got the experience and the knowledge to be able to hire our own officials, and he is training our own basketball officials himself. It's not something that you run across every day where your own staff has that kind of skill set. And so we're super lucky to have somebody with Tyler's experience and knowledge to be able to bring on he's got more than half of the officials that he's hiring on as city staff that have 0 basketball officiating experience. They know the game, of course, but they've never officiated before. And so that's been hugely helpful to have that in our back pocket to be able to kind of go down this other road when the association didn't work out. And then, when the other thing that I'll just mention is, back when we first had a full-time dedicated staff for adult sports programs, it's when I used to do it and the job got split in half and we hired Garrett. At that time, we were somewhere in the neighborhood of 360 teams, 370 teams, I believe, in that neighborhood. And we're up to over 580 teams right now, still with just 1 staff member. And so it speaks volumes to some of the things that Garrett and now Tyler have been doing to make things more efficient and continue the high quality of the program, though. The scheduling thing, going from a pick whatever day you want to a Tuesday, to certain days of the week, that was no small task either, because we've got people that have been in our league for a long time and are very used to saying, I'd like to play on Tuesdays at 7:45.
And happy hour at Rudy's.
Yeah, exactly. we've got a lot of people that have been very used to that, and Tyler has put in a considerable amount of time in just communicating that change so that people are aware that it's coming. And like he said, it's been met with really, really great reviews, because one of the biggest issues that we used to have is meeting people's requests through the regular season and then not being able to meet any of their requests during the postseason tournament, because of course we can't schedule around where we think they might progress through the tournament bracket. It's impossible, right? But now with certain days of the week, you can schedule the entire tournament for a certain division on those certain days that division is playing during the regular season. It has helped substantially with forfeits during the tournament, and just the amount of teams that we're able to accommodate, the amount of feedback that we're getting. Tyler also does a fantastic job at surveying our participants so that he understands what they want, and not only surveying, but then going out and implementing the things that they ask for. And so I'm just really appreciative of all the work that Tyler has done to make this position into what it is today.
Madam President, I actually do have a question for you, Tyler. Yeah. So you made comments about the basketball officials.
Yeah.
What is your stance on the officials on the softball side? Are you seeing any issues there that you're seeing on the basketball side?
Not enough to make a change. There definitely are. They're one of the more passionate groups. They work hard. Most of them work hard to improve. Now again, officiating is what it is, right? It's a second job. It's not an income for these individuals. So sometimes you get individuals out there who are there for themselves, and there is no way around that unless we want to pay them $100 a game, which we don't want to do. So this is balancing it all out. This is the best product we can probably provide. So. Okay.
And I love the new logo for this year.
Yeah. So, well,
I'm a little sad I'm not going to be playing.
Yeah. I don't want to act like I built those. Have you ever heard of 99 Designs online? Mm-hmm. You just basically say what you want. A bunch of different people shoot you a bunch of designs, and then you pick the one you like, and then they get the money that you pay. So, so that's why they actually look pretty good.
And I will say that, just to give you kudos along the same lines as Colin, the new T-shirts are a huge hit.
Yeah, big hit.
Being a part of the softball community, people love the
higher quality.
The higher quality, the logo, it really makes them feel like they're special, like this was something that they really achieved. Yeah. And yes, you see them out. People are wearing them. They're not, in the closet on the top.
Yeah, we got away from the 100% cotton.
So it's a great job. I think you have really improved the program. Not that Garrett did a bad job at all. Love Garrett, but
there were some eye openers when I first got here, but yeah, he's great.
Madam President?
Thank you.
Yes.
If I may, since I work over the wall from this guy, I would just second that he has skills and he's got a lot of range. If there's drama in our department, it's not employees. It's that there was a fight at home court and they're pulling footage, and it's adults acting worse than young kids. And I end up overhearing a fair amount of it, and Tyler, he starts by asking questions. He's patient. He's got really good customer service in situations where you think they're frustrating and people should know better. So I just wanted to add that to the record because it impresses me, and it's frustrating to listen to. And he just goes toward it and seems to solve it pretty effectively, and it's not fun, some of it. So I admire that, and I just wanted to note that. Takes range, this job, beyond scheduling and all the other skills you have. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? Well, yes. Well, thank you. Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you, Tyler. You have a hard time getting out?
All right. And now we have Mr. Mike Barton and an action item for the evening. Yes, this is our first one tonight.
Commissioners, thank you for your time. We have a naming request in front of you. We received a letter from the mayor, consistent with our naming policy, that she would like to name field number 1 at Fuller Park after Charlie Roundtree. Charlie Roundtree, here's another picture of field number 1. And here's the letter of Charlie Roundtree. I mean, you can read it for yourself. I know that we worked with him on the city council for years and years, and he was always a big supporter of parks, and he was on the Western Ada Recreation District board for years. I think he was instrumental in developing the park, and he's done a lot of great things for the community. So we stand behind this 100% and ask for your approval that we can forward this to the city council for their approval.
Well, I have to say, I mean, it's addressed to me, but I never received this letter, but I knew that this was going to be come up tonight in our discussion. I'm just a little bit surprised by the letter.
Madam President, the letter was in the meeting packets. There's also a folder on your desk there. It's the blue folder.
Thank you. But I was aware of this, obviously, because we discussed it to be talking about tonight at our commission meeting and our agenda meeting with the mayor. So I did know it was coming, but I didn't realize that there was an official letter being sent to me. So that's wonderful. But it made sense.
Apologize for the confusion.
But it made sense. He's done so much for the community, and he actually was able to play on that field and use that field, and so does his kids and grandchildren, if I remember correctly.
And I think it would be our intention to do something nice at the field with either a bronze plaque or something that is visible and the community can recognize that the field is named after Charlie.
Madam President.
Commissioner Gelsomino?
I'd like to make a wholehearted motion to approve. If we are, Emily, are we in that section?
It's a recommendation.
Oh, it's a recommendation? Or I guess how would that be worded then? Same way? Just.
You'd like to make a recommendation?
Okay. Madam President, I'd like to wholeheartedly make a recommendation that we move this to City Council for approval.
Naming
Field 1 of Fuller Park after former councilman Charlie Roundtree.
Rick still seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion granted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam President, Emily, you know, I just want to skip the whole city council deal and just approve it right there and then.
All right, and we have the next up is our own Kim Warren with Meridian Pathways Network Map Amendment.
Good evening, Madam President and Commissioners.
Welcome. Sorry, I was trying to catch up. I was shocked by the letter, but I want to read it all, but go ahead,
I can pause. So I really have more of a product than a presentation for you tonight. You've seen quite a bit of me, and we've talked about pathways and had a recent workshop. So we're here tonight with a resolution to ask to approve the work that we've done and the updates we've made to the map. Just as a quick recollection, we did discuss in the workshop several areas we thought merited additional consideration due to growth or other issues. And we have a map now. I've been working closely with Brian McClure in Community Development, who is a planner and a landscape architect, and he knows GIS really well, and he's been a really good kind of pivot person for us to try to use this as a tool and convey what we want until I get additional training. So the map is hard to read at the scale. I have a hard copy if anyone is interested in looking at it. We've split it into north and south. There's a slightly simplified version that we're attaching to the resolution. It's really hard to get a whole city to read at 8.5 by 11. But there's a map, and then we also have this map book. So on the front is a key, similar to other city maps. And then it's just broken out page by page at a scale that's a bit easier to read. So you can glance through that. You can keep that as a reference. no need to examine it in any great detail. We've been through this several iterations, and I think it's important to remember that this is overdue, and we do need to take this snapshot. We need to get pathways drawn in areas that, so when development comes, we can easily require it without conflict or undue discussion. But it's always changing, and it's a lot to consider. So it's taken a great leap since the last map approval, and it's much more current. One thing that we have done is show the changes in kind of an aqua color, where it says, here, I'll pull up a sheet, kind of like this. So in the kind of faded out wide lines, that would have been the initial or original pathway alignment. And we've said, no, it should go around the pond, it should be closer to the river, it should basically trend east-west in this configuration. And so anywhere it changed, it's highlighted in this aqua color. So that's kind of a good at a glance for areas that have changed. And I don't know that there's that much to say additionally, unless you have questions.
Well, so, Ms. Warren, a lot of these updates and changes were from the workshop, correct? And
yes,
some of
so
that came in. Was there anything outside or since the workshop that came out that required a change that maybe we haven't?
There were a few like discussions that Brian and I had about a specific route, and prior to the workshop, I mean, I've been keeping track of these as we go along. I have a whole file like this is now built and it wasn't built before, so there were, I guess.
I was wondering if there's any big changes.
Not any big changes, I would say, since the workshop. We looked at the Aldapi Park area, the Owyhee High School area. We do have schools in this kind of light olive color, and then parks in a brighter green color, which help us orient. We talked about the 10 Mile area. This is west of 10 Mile. And then there was a request in some of the discussions with the mayor to show a pathway adjacent to the I-84 corridor, which really does work through a large part of the city, either through undeveloped areas or areas that are ripe for redevelopment, at least in some estimations. So that was an addition, and then kind of building on the ACHD discussion and any coordination with ITD, we did note pathways, let's see if I can find one, along state highways. The other thing that's been updated along the lines of Lisa's discussion is we're showing rail with trail, of course, in the rail corridor, but there's another alignment, an alternative alignment where it could work, and it's the way the proposed corridor is shown reflects the crossing study that was done a few years ago, the previously referenced information that Compass has been using. So those are some updates that we talked about that are now showing up. We haven't made any major changes since the workshop, just little adjustments. So if there are any other questions.
Thanks for elaborating on that. I just want to know if there's anything.
Madam President?
Yes, Commissioner Steele?
I would like to make a motion that we approve the network pathway amendments to the map.
Okay.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved.
Great job, Kim.
Thank
Wonderful.
you so
Thank
much.
you.
It was a lot of detailed work, and I could see all the different color changing codes. It's kind of hard to get back into that mode since we saw these last, so we can tell it's been a lot of work for you, and we really appreciate all
it's
you
going to
do
be
for
a
that.
good tool, and it. I did, in working with Brian, he has on this same GIS layer nodes, sort of where pathways meet, and all the sidewalks. So it's analyzable. It's a lot of information, and my work is kind of to say, no, we only want to see these things, but it's more integrated now. So it's going to be a lot more useful, a lot more easily shared with other agencies. And it's taken a long time in coming, and I think some of it was the transition. And one more note, if I may, if you were a woman, we celebrated our second annual Park Galentine's Day today. And so there's a small party favor if you're a gal. It was a luncheon. Not official business, but if you wonder what those are, they're just kind of a leftover party favor. So,
Wow. Thank you so much.
sorry, no, Valentine's tomorrow. I would have included everyone, but these were just some extras, and I thought it would be nice to share. So,
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ken.
Mike, I like your title there, Superintendento.
It said Super Nintendo.
That's my icebreaker. Thank you again for your time. When last month you specifically asked for an update on Discovery Park, and I'm here to give you that update. A lot of good progress out there. If it was nicer out, warmer out, we could go on a field trip and actually walk around because it's really taking shape. It's really cool. They made a lot of changes since the parks tour. So just kind of dive right in. Just to go back in time and refresh everybody's memory about what we're doing. Phase 1 is on the bottom left-hand side of the screen. And we have that phasing line there, the dashed line, and that's kind of the boundary of the Williams pipeline, the two gas lines that are located out there. And then you can see at the next slide that how future phases might take shape. Obviously, this is just a concept. It hasn't been defined yet and really developed, but this is more or less what we're thinking. There's going to be additional parking and some more softball fields and courts and more activities for a variety of age groups. We're doing a pretty good job in phase 1 for kids and adults and dog lovers and walkers and people that are enthusiastic about learning about things. And what we need to do is carry that forward and cater to the full demographic of seniors and teens and tweens and just kind of have a park, a regional park that draws all ages into it. That's the goal. So phase 1, what are we doing? Here's kind of a high-level look at the general layout of the park. You can see that there's a couple of lighted softball fields, the dog park, interpretive gardens. Lake Hazel is at the top of the screen, just for orientation purposes. Parking lot, and then the active recreation area that has all the components that I'm going to go into a little more detail about. And then that kind of that arc-shaped lawn that would be our event lawn with a raised stage that's covered, so it's shaded. And that's where we can have events, anything from vendor fairs to car shows to just a variety of things that right now Kleiner Park and Settlers Park are in really high demand, and they're almost overloaded. We have a ton of events that are coming in, and as well as city-sponsored type stuff. So that's kind of an overview of what phase 1 has. And if we go down to the, drill down a little bit farther into the active recreation area, this is kind of the heart of the park. And this is where the destination really is. You can see that we have 3 picnic shelters, a blue, a burgundy, and a green roof. So you'll know if you reserve the, it's not shelter 1, 2, and 3, it's I want to reserve the green shelter or the burgundy shelter. We've just found that kind of works. It's easier to communicate that to people. We've got a restroom concession building. The concession part of the building has a covered awning on it that's orientated away from the setting sun, so there's no heat issues there if you're getting a cold drink or what have you. Destination playground with shade coverings over the top of the playground. We've got a splash pad right here that has interpretive items. All this area in the back is elevated. You can see how many stairs are going up. And there's two roller slides here. There's not enough elevation change to get an actual slide, but these are just like they say, they're roller slides. And there's two of them so kids can race each other to get to the bottom if they're so inclined. Over here is the sand and water play area that's kind of on the same ground plane as the restroom concession. So all this goes up, and then you drop back down, and the rock wall and the climbing map. And then we have a shaded plaza area right here that we're going to embed boulders in there for seating as opposed to like park benches. So it'll be more irregular, more informal. And because there's so many boulders and big rocks that you're about to see, we're going to take those materials and try to spread them out and incorporate them into other areas of the park. There's some at the entrance, there's some at the stage area, so kind of have that mix of materials that carries through. So here's some progress photos. These are a couple weeks old. We've been hit with some weather, so things they slowed down again. But we had a nice dry spell, and it was warm, and the people were out there working. You can see the progress on the restroom concessions, the green shelter, which is the largest shelter, and then shelter number 2. This is kind of how it constructs. Those are the footings. So we dig the whole area out, we pour the footings, we build it all back up with gravel, and then we pour concrete around that. So they're very stable. Women's restroom, that's not a finished product. Obviously, we're going to have stalls on there. They're just not quite there. And stop me if you have questions, please.
Madam President.
Commissioner Gelsomino.
Mike, from that, I guess one of my questions is answered in the top left-hand corner with the rock climbing wall. I was wondering what the scale was. But from the aerial view, and you might be getting to it later on, is the dog park fenced off, kind of like Storybark, or is it more of just...
It's fenced.
It's fenced off,
yeah,
okay.
So we'll hold that thought.
Okay.
I got some good pictures.
Awesome.
It'll start to take shape in your mind after seeing the pictures. So so this is part of the active recreation area, and that boulder wall that I talked about and the climbing map. So we have a map that's going to be in the shape of the state of Idaho. That's raised out a little bit further than the surrounding states. Idaho is not square, so we had to include some of Montana and Oregon and Washington to kind of get a nice square climbable surface. The way that they're building it, there's 3 openings at the top. There's going to be an easy way up. There's going to be a moderately difficult way up, and then a hard way up. And the way that they're going to accomplish that is by this GFRC concrete that they're putting into the mold. The mountains are going to be the hand and footholds. So where it's a little more flat, that's going to be a harder way up. So if you're a little more agile, you're a rock climber, you go up that way. And in the rubber surfacing down below the rock, we'll identify the routes with the black diamond and the green and the blue, just like you would on a trail or a ski slope. So that's kind of the rocks. Rock and the map. And so you remember that I talked about the sand and water play feature. And so on the bottom left-hand corner is the sand and water play channel that's starting to take shape. And it's an irregular channel that kind of emulates the Boise watershed. What they did to form that is took big chunks of styrofoam and put them all together in their shop, and then drew on the styrofoam to get the shape. And then they lettered all the pieces of styrofoam, they pulled them apart to cut the channel, and then they trucked them to the site and they reassembled them on site. So the sand and water play, this feature has a footing underneath it, and then this will all be concrete. Once that's poured, which is going to be next Thursday, all the styrofoam comes off, and then they can start working on the surrounding containment area with seat walls, and there's a planter strip on the top right here for shade. All these trees are orientated to the west of the sand. There's water pumps in there, there's boulders. There's a log that's right in here where the cursor is, similar to the one in the bottom right-hand corner. That is for children of all abilities. If you have mobility issues and you're in a wheelchair, you can wheel up to the log and you can pump water out and you can play in the sand. Here's a picture of the actual log itself that's being carved in our shop. And we've taken and cut an ADA access point so you can actually get two wheelchairs side by side up to the log and you can play. Because we want, everything out here needs to be accessible for, regardless of what your ability is. We want everybody to come here and have fun. So, yeah, really cool. And then you can see how that orientates to the map in the background and the rock, the boulder wall. The railing on top is temporary, just so nobody falls off there. That's not the finished product.
Madam President, Mike?
Yeah.
Commissioner Steele?
With that log, are they treating that log with something or to keep it from blowing up?
Yeah, great question. Absolutely. So we've taken, in the weak parts, we drilled into the log and we bolted it with big washers. And then we took plugs of the same wood and marked the ends. So it can't split apart. And then we're going to put a sealant on it. So it's a high maintenance thing. We think it's going to last probably 10 years. But
I think it's a great feature. Yeah, again, as long as we get a decent, coating of, poly or epoxy or something on it to keep that water from soaking into the wood and running it.
It needs to be somewhat waterproof. We want to get as much of a lifespan that we can. The log weighs 4 tons. So we're not going to pick it up and, it's a crane. And so when it comes time to replacing it, it's got to be cut up in pieces and then taken out of there, and then the new one gets craned in. So yeah, it's a big deal. We want it to last as long as possible.
Awesome.
Playground area, if you remember, we had a big discussion about the interpretive panels. Those are done. We've got the roller slides, the zip line, the main playground with the shade coverings on top, interpretive panels all the way through, and then the 2 to 5-year-old set that's also has some educational items on it. Splash pad area, this is the shelter where the green roof is. You can see how the splash pad kind of orientates to that. The 2 to 5-year-old set, there's a bulb out on the splash pad for toddlers, and that also orientates with the 2 to 5-year-old set. So you can go play, you can go get cooled off in the water. There's places to sit all around there so parents can keep an eye on the little ones. They're out of the kind of the line of fire between the older kids, so they're maybe more confined in one spot. We didn't want user conflicts where older kids when they're having fun, they're going to run over the little kids. They can't help it. They're just out trying to have fun. So splash pad and all the splash pad, the playground, and all this is shipping on Friday, so it should be here in a couple of weeks, and they can start doing the install. So
before we leave this slide, so you're saying there's seating and everything for plenty of places to sit, and those will be the boulder
So the
seats,
boulders,
is that correct?
Yeah, correct. So there's tree boxes in the concrete for shade, and then the boulders will be placed randomly throughout these areas. And they don't show on the plan, but what it is we'll place those in. Once everything's formed up and the base is prepared, kind of like we did at Hillsdale. It's a different rock that we're using, but the rock placing company comes out and they'll take a chunk of the base out and set a boulder in. And if we don't like the look, we'll change it, and we'll be there with the landscape architect, and we'll just kind of eyeball it in. So really what we want to do is we want to have enough seating around the splash pad. We want to orientate the boulders so we can maximize shade and shadow patterns. And
then as far as shade goes, shade structures, the shade structure is on, looks like the right side of the water park. Is that the triangle, or not the triangle, the rectangle on the
this
right?
one right
That's
here.
your shade structure?
That's one of the picnic shelters.
Did we ever go with a picnic shelter that's not reservable, or are they all reservable?
They're all reservable.
So is there any shade structure that's not reservable that would be available? No.
There is not. There's 2 in the dog park that are not reservable. They're 14 by 16 feet.
Mm-hmm.
There is not a picnic shelter that is non-reservable. There's opportunities throughout the design for shade, but not an organized group picnic area. You have to reserve it.
But for shade around the play areas, it's trees, correct?
Yes, correct. Anything else? So dog park, up in the left-hand corner, you can see the dog park laid out. And really what we did is that the Story Bark Park works so well. We said, you know, how can we, why change it? This one's smaller, but we didn't really change anything. We have an area for large dogs, small dogs. We have a hierarchy of surfacing where you have a concrete welcome area, the double gates. You go in and there's a loop pathway around with the gravel, and then there's living turf in the back of that. So you have some of those transition of surfaces to minimize wear and tear. There's 2 picnic shelters in here. There's year-round water. There's actually 2 double gates on each park. So you can come in this way in the small dog area, or you can come in right here. Same way on the large dog through the main entrance, or you can come through the side. The living turf in the large dog area, if you don't fence it off in the winter, it's just going to turn to mud. So we have this hierarchy of surfaces, and we can put a short fence across there. You can see the construction progress. Again, the 2 shelters right here with the footings are going in. We've got all the gravel in. We've got about half the concrete placed. We've got fence posts in. This is really taking shape. Question?
I know you took a gasp. I thought I was going to ask to speak.
Formulating a question.
Madam President, sorry. I was kind of trying to answer my own question, so I didn't have to take up time. But those 2 shelters, am I correct in saying those are the 2 boxes in between the gravel areas in the top left-hand corner map?
Yes.
Okay.
Those are the footings for the posts. So all that'll be filled with gravel. Those won't be visible. All that gets filled with gravel. So the base rock underneath the concrete is it's about 3 feet thick. So what we found, if we don't remove all the soil underneath picnic shelters, and we just do a little bit of gravel, the soil underneath gets saturated because we hose them off so much, and then it freezes and everything frost heaves and moves, and so we want this to be here for a long, long time. Softball fields. So you can see the design in the upper left-hand corner and the progress. They're done. I mean, they're like 95% of the way done. The lights work, the grass is in, the fences are up. I mean, they've got a little fabric to put up, but the infields are in. We need to put bases in and benches and a drinking fountain. And we've got a drinking fountain with a mister going in, so you can go up and get a drink of water and have the mister run and stuff. So, yeah, softball fields are
Madam
taking
President?
shape.
So Mike,
Mr.
on the
Jensen?
softball fields, you said a
Yeah.
little fabric to go in?
A little bit of fence
Explain.
fabric at the bottom. Right here, there's some gaps in the fencing that they haven't put the chain link on yet.
Oh, okay.
Just, yeah. And the dugouts, they need to put there's shade cloth that goes over the top of the dugouts as well. So some details, little finishing touches, but it's,
I just want to make sure we were going to have shade.
the dugouts are shaded.
To get a little hot.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Okay. Thank you.
Then if you remember some of the art and signage.
Wow.
Little selfie stop in the playground. The interpretive gardens, the main entry signs. Just kind of fun stuff. And not so fun, but we are putting a maintenance shop in. The enhancement to build the maintenance shop was approved by council during last year's budget cycle, and it was bid this winter to take advantage of wintertime pricing, and we got all those contracts executed, and they have since then finished pouring the foundation and the stem wall, and as soon as the weather turns a little bit, they'll be putting block in, and it'll be done in a few months.
Madam President.
Commissioner Gelsomino?
Mike, when you said signage, it clicked a light bulb of a question I've been meaning to ask you. It's a shame that in this day and age we have to kind of put labels on everything, but for people to be a little bit smarter. But one of the things that I notice at Storybark is kids like to play in the gravel, and we know that dogs urinate and do their bodily business in the gravel. And then these kids, aren't always being monitored by parents because parents are discussing and talking. And then they put their hands in their mouth and in their face, and that's just how diseases are spread. Is there any potential, and like I said, it's sad that we have to spoon feed all the time so that people don't, make poor decisions, but is there any potential signage that we could put at the entrance of this new dog park and maybe in the future Storybark Park that kind of gives a heads up to parents and incoming family member or dog owners? Hey, if you're bringing your kids, please make sure if they're playing in the gravel, wash their hands. Like I said, we're being parents to the parents, but I'd rather not see kids get sick. Is there something that could is that an option that could be brought up?
It's a great question. I don't know where you draw the line between common sense and
natural selection.
Well,
Madam President, having you heard of probiotics?
I did.
Probiotics.
Right.
I mean, yeah, probably.
Oh.
It doesn't kill them, it makes them strong.
Right. That's what my mother always used to say. You'll build an immune system.
Dogs' mouths are cleaner than humans. No, I mean, yeah.
I've seen what they eat.
It's not. yeah. I buy it. If you think, I mean, I off the top of my head, without coming across just to people, we try not to put a lot of signs out.
Right.
It's like you could put out one sign that says "Don't be stupid,"
Yes, exactly.
and then that covers everything. I mean, but that might be a little offensive. If you have an idea, I'd love to hear it. I mean, think about it.
I mean, other than a sign,
And we might say no, but
I mean,
I'd love to hear
I
it.
think of hand sanitizer stations in the dog park, even when dog owners are picking up after the dogs, sanitizing their hands.
Yeah, that's
There's water fountains.
that's the same water fountain the dog drank out of and peed on. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good idea.
Kick the water on, wash your hands off.
Good thought.
Madam President,
Yes, Commissioner Steele?
Mike, real quick on those signs, did we address the issue of not having Meridian plastered somewhere on there to make sure they know it's Meridian and not CUNA?
It's going on there.
Okay.
Yep. I don't have an updated proof.
No, that's
but
fine.
Meridian will be on there. Yep. City of Meridian. Yep.
Will it be on one of those 3 towers?
Yep. Right at the entrance. You bet. Yep, that was a great point.
Hey, Madam
Yep,
President?
John.
Yes.
Hey, just a quick, I know it's not technically on, but the idea was spawned by your shelter deal. Have you thought about naming other shelters in other parks?
Yeah.
Like identifying them? I mean, you could have the Malam shelter, you could have the steel structure, you could have all these little legacy opportunities. Just thought I'd throw it out there.
Do you, I mean,
think
all
about
you got
it.
to do is submit a letter if it makes sense, and
I think colors or names make a better,
Yeah.
way than numbers.
I
Kleiner,
love that.
people are always getting confused.
Yeah.
So having a better way of people to, recognizing it, I think is always good.
Just from overhearing conversations with people try to reserve a shelter at Story Park, it's either the green shelter or the blue shelter. It's not, well, where is A1 and B2 and
Exactly.
it's red, green, or, yeah, so that's kind of just, I mean, we try to learn and remember what we learn, and so sometimes it works. Just some other progress photos. This was 2 weeks ago.
Now, if the stage is in here, are you going to show us one of the stage? You said
Stage
that
is
there's
in it.
like a...
Is the road in?
Not in yet. We missed the asphalt trails that go around the interpretive areas. We missed the paving day by like 3 days. And the weather turned and the asphalt plants closed and all that stuff they had to get the asphalt in first because they can't cross the stage area with the trucks. So just the way that it's sequenced, it put that we put that off until here coming up with a little bit warmer weather. Some of the trees going in, guy gluing pipe.
He's happy about it. Good.
That's all I got.
Madam President. All right. Commissioner Steele?
Okay, a couple questions, Mike. What's the date close to when we're going to open this thing?
So
2019.
It's September, isn't it? Is it still on? I thought it was September.
Hence the question.
Our
it looks like you're going to be able to play baseball soon.
well, yes and no, because if it's still an active construction site, we can't let people in there. But the real thing is we need to get everything finished, which we're working hard to do. And then the grass seed has to go down, and then the grass seed has to grow and establish itself before we let people in the park. Because the first thing we're going to do is have a grand opening event. So the park's going to look finished for 6 weeks or so. I'm thinking mid-July.
Wow.
Our builder's risk insurance expires on July 1st. I don't want to re-up it. So.
Now, second.
So substantial completion is, I think substantial completion is sometime in June, and then we just need that grow-in period. But the thing is right now the weather it can be, I mean, hopefully we're getting it all out of that. I mean, we're getting enough water. Okay, it can just rain for another week or two and then stop, and then we'll be good. But if we have a really rainy spring, it can delay things.
Okay, next best question is that pipeline.
Yeah.
They talked about 2019, 2020, getting that thing replaced.
Yeah.
Have we heard any more from them on what their plans are?
A little bit. And so the last time I talked to them, they have a regulatory requirement as population encroaches on their easements, and they said it's like 50 people a day for longer than 60 days. That triggers, they have 2 years to complete an evaluation of the condition of the pipeline. So what they do is they go down the line and they'll pothole it, they'll pressure test it, and then at that point they'll determine whether they need to replace it or if it's okay the way it is. So there isn't an imminent replacement, which is different than everything that we've heard. So they're going to come in and they'll pressure test it, and they may say, yeah, it's good for I don't know, 50 years.
But that's not what they told us when we started this whole project.
I
I
know.
mean, we were told, okay, we're going to replace it within the next 2 or 3 years.
You're right. Yeah, so the guys here in Meridian told us that. And then during the process, I've been working with a person in Salt Lake on getting the easements and some of the encroachments that we have inside their easement and getting the agreements in place. And according to him, and the local people confirmed it, he said, no, that's not the way it works. It's not an automatic replacement. Because to replace those 2 pipes in the park is like $1.5 million just in the park. And they don't go and they don't do one parcel. They want to go, if they're going to replace something, they're going to go in and they're going to do 2 miles.
Well, you know, if they would have been upfront with this in the beginning, they could have tested that in the last year or 2 and actually come across and said, okay, we're good for another 20, 30 years, and we could have continued on and greened up the other side of this and actually had fields to play on.
No, well, yes and no, because in our ACHD staff report, we need to build a road on the east side before we do phase 2.
Yeah, but again, the plans could have been further along. I mean, I think it's, you know, just.
We could have had, plans maybe, but we couldn't have built it. Anyway, it's difficult because what we found out too, working with them, is they don't have an easement for their pipelines like that has meets and bounds and a legal description with it. They have offsets. So to determine where their easement is, they have to go dig and find the pipeline, and then they measure. It's 50 feet from one and 75 feet from the other one, and that's their easement. So we ended up with fence posts in their easement. I mean, they're going to let us build things on top of their easement. We just need to figure out how to do it. So if they have to come in and replace the pipe, that maybe they're only taking out some interim improvements or a smaller section of a roadway. That's the plan. I don't think that the more you talk to them, the clearer it gets, and the less it seems to be just a deal where you have to stop here until, you know, we're not as much at the mercy of what they're doing as we originally thought. So it's actually really good. Anyway, I hope that helps.
Well, it's good to know that they may not be replacing it, right? So it sounds like most likely they're just going to inspect and then sign off for an undetermined amount of time at that point.
It's been in there since 1960 sometime, so I don't know. And it has nothing to do with the integrity of the pipe. It has to do with the wall thickness.
Yeah.
So you have to have a certain wall thickness on the pipe when you're around population centers. But like I said, they're not going to go in and replace our 1,000 feet. They want to do 2 miles worth. So they might be able to slip line it. They might.
You don't know when they're doing the inspection.
They're going to have, once the park opens, they have 2 years to complete their report.
Commissioner Jensen, did you still have a question?
So in the meantime, I think we just. I think we're going to work with them to just do some interim improvements on top of it. Let's get across it and go on the other side and keep going.
So Mike, how are we doing on budget?
Oh, that's a great question. So we are, our construction, we got, first of all, we got great bids. The difference between the high bids and the low bids were like over $1.5 million. So we got great bids going in. Right now we're under budget. We're running on fumes, but we're under budget. We've gotten past all of the unknowns, so our budget is going to be, I mean, we're fine. Okay. You know, there were some unknowns with the ACHD right-of-way. We did improvements on Lake Hazel Road and some of those requirements. Some of the project wasn't fully designed because we wanted to hit our bid window. It was more important to hit the bid window than it was. Consultants right now are extremely busy, and some of these designs and this planning lag behind. But we said, look, we got to get far enough along that we need to bid this thing in the winter. If we don't, we're either not going to get contractors or we're going to get killed with pricing. So we bid it, and then we had a couple things in there that we just change ordered in with our low bid contractors because they've already established those low prices. So we've gotten past all that. So now it's just, let's get some good weather and get to the finish line, and it's going to be really cool.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mike.
Sure.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Well, thank you very much, Mike.
You're
Thanks for
welcome.
going through this again.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it.
Congratulations on keeping it under budget so far.
Thank you. No, it will be, without a doubt.
That's awesome, because in the end, it's taxpayers, it's always nice to see it in the budget.
I can't give you an exact date when we're gonna have a grand opening, but I can tell you it's under budget.
So if we did have extra money, though, could we add extra shade? Just no.
We already added shade on the stage.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of the things that if we have money left over or the budget's looking good to the end, right now the playground area has bark chips in it. And what I'd really like to do is replace it with poured in place, the rubber surfacing. So that's, I think, a huge priority because the chips are going to get carried in the splash pad and they're going to get scattered everywhere. So, yeah.
Makes sense. Thank you. And I think you're up next.
I am up next. Thank you.
On Kleiner Park bandshell shade. Look at that.
So bandshell
Get a new shade update.
So just to orientate everybody with the bandshell at Kleiner Park, the face of the bandshell faces west. And in the summer, it is brutally hot in there. You can see that this is a view of the bandshell, and this is more or less when the park first opened, maybe a year or two afterwards. You can see that there's very little shade covering on the spectator berm. So pretty barren, I mean, not very enjoyable, really. If you're out there and it's hot, you're cooking. So what we did is a couple years ago, we wanted to add shade for the spectators. And we went in with this planting plan that developed rows of trees down that hill. So you would have opportunities for shade, and you would also have view corridors so you could see down to the stage. So that year we went out and planted the trees. We put a total of 28 larger 3 to 4 inch caliper trees in that were about 20 feet tall going in. All of them lived. All of them are growing. They're flourishing. They're really doing a good job. So we're going to have this nice canopy up and over. This picture is a little bit dated. They're quite a bit bigger than that. If you've been out there and noticed, I don't know. Anyway, so they're doing the job. The spectators they're getting a little bit of comfort there. The next thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to provide comfort for performers. So you can see that orientation, the sun just beats in there. Came up with a solution to cover the front of the band shell with shade fabric that has 2 different layers. Each layer is about 4 feet apart. And it gives you full coverage across the front of the band shell. It's the height of the fabric will be positioned in such a way that you could be standing on the top of the hill and still see the stage. So there might be a small sliver of sun that comes in under some of the higher parts, but if you're on the stage performing, all you have to do is just move a little bit or step backwards, and then you're in the shade. So here's the top view of the overlapping stage. We moved the side poles in a little bit because there's a potential conflict there with the roof. The manufacturer's telling us that fabric arcs 4 feet between the posts, but I don't trust them. I don't want it to even get close to the roof. So the poles have been moved and adjusted a little bit, and we're still finalizing engineering. You can see some of the footings. The footings that need to go in are 13 feet deep. And it's a lot to hold up fabric, but it needs to withstand 120-mile-an-hour wind load. Colors, gray and blue. We had blue and yellow originally picked, and it was just really bright, tacky, and I don't do colors, so it got picked. So anyway, it's blue and silver for the colors. And then as far as timing, so again, a winter bid. We sent the specifications to the bidders in November, had a pre-bid. We got 2 bids on December 4th. The contract was approved by City Council on January 2nd. We're getting the final engineering plans. Construction should begin next week. They're lagging a little bit on their construction schedule, but substantial completion is going to be by May 15th. So it'll be up, it'll be restored, everything will be cleaned up and out of there by Gene Kleiner Day, for sure. I mean, that's the first big event where you really want shade or some kind of covering. So be happy to answer any questions.
Madam President.
Gelsomino.
Mike, I think that it's a wonderful idea, and I'm excited to see it. Have you seen or heard of any potential? I'm playing a bit of a devil's advocate here. Have you heard of any potential opposition to the aesthetic look of the shade cloth with its almost abstract geometric shape versus the more rounded shape of the band shell itself?
That's a great question. No.
Okay.
We've had discussion about acoustics, and I think we determined that most people that are in there have amplified sound, so it wouldn't really affect the acoustics that much. And even at that, if it's so unbearably uncomfortable that it's not, you don't want to be there anyway. So
yeah, in the prioritization on this one was all of these topics were discussed. The overwhelming need was we're hot,
right,
and fix it. So the color, the acoustics, all that other stuff was all on the table, and then at the end of the day, it was we've got to fix the heat piece. So yeah.
And
yeah, exactly.
And there were some other iterations of the solution kind of sketched out, and this one made the most sense. There were panels up there, kind of like the Shakespeare Theater There was a big arch on top.
We went through a lot of this
Yes.
before you were
I think
here.
And I'm
Yeah,
trying to
so-
add
have,
some
like-
context
Yes.
to the discussion, because
Yeah, thank you.
we turned over every stone in some conversations, and it came down to
Cool it down.
cool it down. Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I figured that it was probably before my time.
Yeah, that's okay.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Good, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Awesome.
And now we're on to staff reports. Colin, are you leading us on that?
All right, I'll go first. So I just wanted to give you a quick update on alcohol permits. I gave a presentation last month, and the commission recommended our proposal to City Council, and I went to City Council the following week, and they approved our proposed code update. So alcohol permits are no longer with our department. So we are pretty excited with that change and that ability to, I guess, not have to go through the alcohol permit process anymore and gain some efficiencies in our department. Home Court Bay 5, we are moving right along in that project. Our architect is working on construction documents right now, and we are still on schedule to, we did have some budgeting challenges, and we had to simplify the front desk area. We weren't able to move the vestibule outside of the building like we had originally hoped. That's going to have to stay where it currently is. And so we made some modifications to simplify things a little bit based on the budget that we had, but we're still on track to have everything done in this summertime window that we have between, I think there's a tournament in May, and then there's another one at the beginning of October, that we have this window that everything needs to get done by, so that we can accommodate some of the reservations that we already have. So we're still extremely excited to be moving forward with that. Also wanted to announce that our summer camp coordinator started yesterday. Jenna Fletcher is the newest member of our team. We are, and I can't remember if I told you this last month, that she was coming on board, but we're super excited to have Jenna. She comes to us from Nampa Parks and Recreation, where she was a full-time staff member there, and she decided that she recently had a baby, and so she's and her and her husband live in Meridian, and so they, as a family, decided that she was going to just work part-time. It worked better for her schedule, wanting to be at home a little bit more. And so we all know Jenna already just from going to the conference together and being close. And Jake is he came from Nampa and worked with Jenna a lot. And so we are extremely excited to have Jenna as our seasonal camp coordinator for this summer. Concert series, the update is that we've got some dates and times. We're going to be on Thursday nights out front here at City Hall, three Thursdays in June, 3 Thursdays in July, and we are just finalizing the contract with with the event producers that are going to put that on. It's the same group that's doing the farmers market, and so that is a done deal. We are just trying to finalize the name. The tentative name right now is Main Street Live, and so welcome any comments about the potential name for the concert series. Let's see. And then last thing I wanted to mention was the first day of shelter reservations was February 1st. It was a great day in that it wasn't particularly super busy. The thing that we did this year that was new is, now that we've kind of got Rec 1 down, what we decided to do, instead of opening online reservations at the same time as in-person reservations, excuse me, we went ahead and, to drive more people online, we opened shelter reservations online at midnight. Excuse me, been a little sick lately. And so we opened shelter reservations at midnight. And so before we opened for the day at 8 a.m., we already had 17 shelter reservations that, geez, I'm sorry. And so we were pretty happy about how that went. So that's it. I'll stand for questions.
You have some
Madam
great
President?
updates. Commissioner.
Okay, Colin, I like the name, Main Street Live. It resonates.
It's jazzy. Great.
It's jazzy.
All right, well, thank you, Colin. And Mr. Burton, are you back?
Yeah. So you heard some of what I've been working on. One thing that I thought I'd bring up is the Mayor's Senior Advisory Council has a participatory budget amount of money that they work on every year. They have a participatory project, or at least they do this year. And so it was talked about maybe putting a fishing dock at Kleiner Park for ADA access for fishing, expand fishing opportunities to people with mobility issues. So we're looking at a spot by the South Pond at Kleiner, by the Senior Center, and we'd have a ramp sidewalk down there and it'd be a floating dock. Anyway, just want to give you a heads up. The seniors, I think, are coming in to talk to you about it next month. So more to come on that, just to kind of stir the thoughts up. And
I love the idea. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, it's actually pretty cool. We've been trying to find, we were going to apply for a grant through state parks, through the Cutthroat License Plate Fund that helps with some of those. And this kind of just dropped in our lap, and we think it's a good fit. We can do the sidewalk and they can do the dock, and it's awesome. And then people with mobility issues can get close to the water and fish. So that's all I have.
It's a great idea.
Sit for questions.
Thank you. No, I think that's a great idea. I think we're excited to hear about that from the Senior Center. So any other updates or staff reports? All right. Well, this has been a wonderful meeting. Do we
Madam
have...
President?
Yes, Commissioner
I'd
Stewart.
like to make a motion, we adjourn tonight's meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion granted. See you next month.